There may be a more unusual political campaign than we have had in 2024, at least for the presidency, but I can't think of one, maybe 1824, which was a little bit odd, but this one's really odd. We've had the leading candidate, the incumbent president, pretty much be forced by the leadership of the Democratic Party to step down. I don't think he really wanted to at all. The person who substitutes for him, of course, is his vice president, Vice President Harris, who has never won a delegate vote in her life. And so as a result, we have someone who comes in pretty much, I wouldn't say unvetted, but loosely vetted, lightly vetted, rather than going through the candidate nomination and voting procedures. On the other side of things, we have the reality that Donald Trump is running for his third time now. He is a populist, ties him with the other major populist in American history, William Jennings Bryan. And of course, Bryan ran 3 times for the presidency, lost by more each time, by the way. But Harris is lightly vetted. The process by which she was chosen to be vice president seems not to have included a deep vetting of her. And the end result, therefore, is that I think there are some questions that need to be answered. And so we're going to do a series of questions. And this particular set will deal with pandemic, reproductive, and gender issues. So let's start with the pandemic questions. Now, so let me ask you, Vice President Harris, if an infection equal in severity to that of the coronavirus in 2020 occurred, would you ask for the lockdown of schools? Now, we know that in terms of education, in terms of psychology, in terms of social development, that the school lockdowns of 2020 had major and negative impacts. That's one side. On the other side of it is, of course, is that when you have thousands of people in classrooms, exchanging germs, are they going to take an infection home to their parents, and in particular to their grandparents? We need to know where you stand on this, because there are 2 different possibilities here. As president, you're going to be asked to side for a lockdown or not side for a lockdown. So we need to know what you think. Okay, and we also need to know why you think what you think. The different studies have gone in different fashions, so there is no consensus on this issue, and I think we need to know why you think what you think. Would you require masking where you can enforce it? I was walking past a city park yesterday, and beautiful day, plenty of open room. Somebody was wearing a mask. Now, I don't know if they had respiratory problems or what have you, but I see people wearing masks, and they don't seem to be wearing them because there is an active coronavirus problem in an area. Rather, I think they are wearing masks because they're frightened, which is understandable, or for political statements. That is, that this is what my party believes in, and by gosh, I'm going to go do it. And so, as a result, we have a whole different set of views regarding masking one way or the other. And we should know where you stand on this. As to mandatory vaccinations, where the government has the authority to enforce them, say in the military, would you be willing to go to mandatory vaccinations? Just as a matter of course. We need to know these answers. We need to know whether or not you would order vaccinations. Now, on one hand, vaccinations are good. I've had 7 COVID vaccinations, so I'm not exactly anti-vax. But having said that, is the short-term and long-term impact of vaccinations is highly contested. We really don't know what the long-term implications are for somebody, say 30 years from now. So, you have to make a decision on this one. And I think we need to know what your thoughts are on this topic. Now, you're an attorney. You're, Attorney General. So you have worked with many cases where you have to deal with the preponderance of evidence. In terms of where COVID-19 came from, would the preponderance of evidence, and we're not looking for a deadlock on this, but would the preponderance of evidence lead you to believe that the origins of COVID-19 were in a wet market in Wuhan? Or would you believe that the preponderance of evidence would indicate that a lab leak in Wuhan was the most likely source for the virus? And, this has diplomatic, medical, economic implications. And of course, I think that the American people are entitled to understand your views on this topic. Now let's go to reproductive and gender issues. This has been highly controversial, but would you sign a law making the standards that prevailed under Roe v. Wade and Casey the standard for the entire nation? And what do I mean by that? Well, Roe v. Wade was a little foggy, but Casey was not. It was a very clearly written decision. Would you sign a law that would essentially overturn the Dobbs decision by making a United States law that the standards, particularly of Casey, would prevail across the country? There may be a constitutional issue in here, but that's not the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking is, would you sign such a law? And again, I think everybody has an interest in what your answer would be. Now, so let's assume that you did sign such a law. Would you accept exceptions on grounds of religion for institutions to such a law? That is, obviously Catholic hospitals and Catholic health services are very much against being forced to give abortions, very much against offering abortions. It's not part of their religious background, it's not part of their religious training, and the Catholic Church has been very decisive on the subject of saying that abortion is tantamount to murder. And it's not just Catholics, but I don't think that Mennonite health facilities, and there are some, Jehovah's Witness health facilities, there are really some of those. Are they forced to offer abortions even if it is very much against their mission? I don't know. Or perhaps on grounds of personal ethics for practitioners. Can someone say, as in conscience objections to going to war, can someone say that in good conscience I can't perform an abortion? And then, of course, get fined or have other bad things happen to them. Would this be fair? We're talking about doctors and nurses, aides, people such as that. Would people who have ethical objections to abortion be forced, in essence, to offer abortions in order to retain their jobs or not be arrested or anything like that? Now, of course, there's a flip side of that, which is that in some places, even within the limits of the law, there would be nobody offering abortions and no institution that would be offering abortions. And if you decide that women have a right to abortion and therefore you're signing a law, then they have a right to an abortion. And so, as I say, this gets complicated. We need to know where you stand on the issue of exceptions to such a law, assuming that you would sign such a law into practice. Recently, of course, in the Alabama court case, we had the question of whether fetuses conceived through in vitro fertilization are people. The Alabama Supreme Court decision was roundly criticized, but nevertheless, there is some feeling that that essentially the results of in vitro fertilization are people. This needs to be addressed. That should be addressed by you. Certainly the Supreme Court could get involved in this one, and you will probably have 2 nominees to the Supreme Court should you win the presidency. So I think people need to know exactly where you stand on these matters. How about if a child is carried to term and delivered, or a fetus survives an abortion, and they have significant and irremediable health issues? Under those circumstances, I think we can all accept that people should be made comfortable as much as you can under these circumstances. Should they simply be allowed to die? I think this is an important issue, and I think it's probably going to get to be a bigger issue as time goes by. Now, Governor Newsom of your state, California, has signed a law that generally prohibits school districts from giving parents information relating to their child's sexual orientation or gender identity. Do you support this? Now, there's a little bit of a conflict going on here. I can't help but notice that 2 parents were sentenced to prison for the actions of their child, and when that child shot up a school. So the obligations of parents may be strengthening at the same time that the right of parents are being diminished. So do you really think that a school district should be prevented from giving parents information relating to their child's gender identity or sexual orientation? You have 2 different, very different points of view here. One, of course, is that a child is, at some level, is protected by the state. But parents, in law and in tradition, have obligations and duties and rights pertaining to their children. So this is a very complicated issue, and I would be very happy to know where you stand in regards to the law that Governor Newsom has signed into law. Now, many countries have backed away from transgender transitions. Do you support giving adolescents who believe that their true gender differs from their biological gender puberty-blocking drugs? We know, of course, that in some way this impacts their future, and that it's quite possible that developing adolescents drugs such as these will impact their ability to have families later on, impact their ability to have children. So there's that. And there's a question of, the American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, all these different associations say that this is a good thing to do. So the weight of professional opinion is on the side of giving gender-blocking drugs or puberty-blocking drugs. At the same time, though, when we look at countries such as the United Kingdom or Sweden, they are backing away quite vigorously from doing these types of transitions. So again, I think there's a very muddled area, and it's an area where we would like to have clarity, at least on your part. Would your answer be the same for transitioning surgeries as it was for the previous question? For those under 18, of course, top surgeries in which people have their breast removed, and bottom surgeries in which their genitalia is changed. Again, nobody, a 13, 14-year-old may not realize that down the road a particular type of surgery is going to really impact their lives. But at the same time, the professional societies are pretty firm in saying that these are, in some instances, appropriate actions to take. And I think we need to know what your viewpoint is on this. After all, having your genitalia changed is a major event in someone's life and will impact them quite significantly for the rest of their lives. Should people who are biologically men, biologically women, be allowed to compete in sports under the gender with which they identify? This is not a minor thing. If you say take the Cornell men's track team, probably the least of the Cornell men's track team can beat the best of the Cornell women's track team. So there are implications to this. Now, does that mean that people should be forbidden of one gender, should be forbidden to going into biological gender, should be prevented from going into other sports or into sports of other genders? Well, I'm a golfer, and there have been several women golfers. Babe Zaharias comes immediately to mind, who could have competed on a regular basis on the men's tour. I don't know that she would have been a big star, but she certainly could have made a living competing on the on the PGA, the men's PGA tour. So this is not cut and dried, but where do you stand on the issue of gender in sports? Again, I think this is a very important issue. Certainly if you read the newspapers, when you look at the headlines and all that, just watch talk shows on television. Men and women's sports has become a flashpoint, and I think we need to know where you stand on that. Thank you very much. I hope to come back with more questions for you, but I think these are important questions for the American people to know the answers to, or to put it more bluntly, what your answers are. And so, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope to have more questions for you in a little bit. Take care. Bye-bye.